hide malicious features because everything is being documented and no certain person can actually secretly implement something. Which relates to also recent news about the Sandy Bridge, I think, processor from Intel, which allegedly contains some DRM components for the media industry, which is supposed to work, of course, against the user, which is a waste of transistors on the board and a waste of CPU and CPU time, which means also energy and so on and so forth. All of these things to do with development, even in this case of chip designs, if it was all out there in the open, there won't be any discussion about whether it's DRM and whether it exists. People will just see that, and Intel will be more afraid of doing this type of thing because they'll say, well, people will see what we did, and they will just go to AMD or to ARM, VIA, whatever. Actually, if you ask WikiLeaks also about the motivation of what they did, one answer they might come up with is when people do something wrong, they will know they'll get caught for doing something they shouldn't have done. The other thing, of course, is the kind of preventive thing, is that if we assume or if we impose the conditions set by WikiLeaks, or if we encourage people to work transparently, then people will start to behave from now on, because they will know, okay, well, secrecy doesn't work because sooner or later somebody's becoming unhappy and he leaks the documents and whatever. One of the funny responses now, instead of the US trying to go more transparent, is allegedly now Obama or his department is sending around this memo saying to try and find unhappy employees and trying to, I don't know, fire them based on something they didn't do because they might leak documents. It's kind of an Orwellian scary thing, but they basically go through all the employees and say, well, it's kind of like Minority Report. They say, well, we see that you're not a very happy employee. Well, you haven't done anything wrong, but we want to reduce the risk, so sorry, you're out because we don't find you loyal enough. And that's even worse also in the sense that it creates an echo chamber. So only the people who are kind of true believers in everything that's being done by the management will be kept inside the system, and that makes it even worse. So you seal yourself with a bunch of people that are completely unopen to dissent or to disagreement.
Yeah, no, I thought. Sorry. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right, I sat out the last 15 or 20 minutes because it was really, really badly siloning, and every time I tried to chip in, it appeared you didn't hear me. So I think it's sort of back for now, fingers crossed. But no, that plays into there was another thing about the American military, that they have certain tests to see if you're suitable or not. And if you're not, it's like physical ability tests and attitude and aptitude and all this kind of stuff. And apparently they have lowered the bar on some of these tests for people that previously wouldn't have been considered because they were deemed to be too violent or too independent or too like ex-gangbangers coming out of jail looking for a career, and thinking, well, previously we wouldn't have accepted you, but now, hey, you're good with a gun, aren't you? You've no problem causing violence and mayhem, and hey, we need the numbers. You're in, Just add the military tag onto your gang tag,
I think Roy brought up a very good point just now, and it was one actually I hadn't considered. And whilst I was concentrating on the side effect of any sort of leak, not just WikiLeaks, but any sort of expose that might have repercussions that the person who's releasing it didn't plan for or wasn't aware of, I think Roy brings up a very good point in that if the US, in this example, are being more vigilant in who they employ and who they keep on their books, WikiLeaks or anybody leaking information from these agencies could create inadvertently a more secure environment, because it would make the agency itself sort of look in on itself and tighten up its own security, which ultimately, ultimately, if people champion the release of information, ultimately could be detrimental to that release. But yeah, sorry, Gordon, can you are you back with us?
No, well, I don't know. I think so.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Right. No, I was going to say the problem. There's two problems with this idea of. I mean, I agree in principle that if you're writing stuff that you expect to be made public, whether you intended it to be made public or not is a side issue. Whether you expect it to be at some point in the public domain, that it makes you behave more responsibly. That in theory works. In practice, it doesn't in the current climate because you've got all the various outlets, the various governments are essentially staffed and run entirely on last century people who were brought up and raised on the whole centralising of information, and they just don't understand this transparency thing. They've been brought up, they've been trained on what their predecessors done, and they continue the same pattern. They don't get it. I mean, a lot of these people, you'd be surprised if they know what electricity is, let alone what the internet is. And they're old school people who are built on the whole wrong model, and they assume that any information that does get out, they can go and, quote, get it back, as the US government have been determined to force WikiLeaks to, quote, give them back these leaks. It's bits, it's bytes, it's copies, there's nothing to give back.
This is stolen. This is stolen.
It's a copy of something. They just don't understand that. But the idea, they know that they clamp down on that. Yeah, I mean, they know that, and they also know that anything that does get leaked, they've got enough of the main levers that what people see and what people read and what people hear isn't directly. WikiLeaks is rare in that it gives you the direct, unfiltered stuff without any bias on it. But while they know they've got the hands on the levers of spin of all the main media and news corporations and the main websites, the mainstream, they know that what the public see and what the public hear comes filtered through those levers. And that's why people assume that, WikiLeaks released information and it cost lives. And it's just perpetuated through these mainstream media things. And despite the fact that it hasn't actually done that, and that WikiLeaks offered to redact, they offered to work with the American government, the various arms of the American government, to redact sensitive information, and everyone that they approached in the American government just refused. They said, no, we're not going to do that. And WikiLeaks themselves did the best they could to redact information. They worked with others to redact that and do it responsibly, and then release the redacted stuff. And yet, despite that, all the mainstream sources are saying, oh, it's irresponsible and they've got blood on their hands because they didn't redact information. They did. The fact that saying that they didn't is complete bullshit. It's spin control. And governments, old school governments, assume that while they still have the levers in place to go into damage control mode for anything that is actually released, then they won't, in reality, they won't change their behaviour. All they'll do is use excuses to clamp down and say, we need to introduce these new controls and new extra CCTV camera in every cubicle, in every office, and hidden microphones in every office, just to make sure that we control that there's no more leaks. We can't trust you to be an employee and treated information sensitively, and any company that wants a government contract to do X, Y, and Z will have to comply with this regulation that includes spyware into computers and everything. They'll just use it as an excuse to clamp down and insist that the 19th century way of control and government is the way that it should be because they are in control of it, and that anything that threatens that is wrong and it's whatever. I don't know if I'm starting to ramble, but...
No, not at all.
Well, one of the things I saw, I was pretty surprised when I saw the so-called left-wing press playing along the same lines as Fox News and all the Republican type of Murdoch type of press. What I actually saw is in MSNBC, which of course is relations to Microsoft as well, but that's a side issue. They were trying to play the card of basically the cables are not accurate or WikiLeaks is not accurate, and they found one thing in one of the cables which turned out not to be correct, which was an allegation made in the cable. The cable it's a true translation of what's in the cable. It's just they found one error in the thing, and they were trying to say, well, all the leaks are basically false because we found one mistake, and that's a very typical thing in any website. I mean, I had people try to do this to my website and find like one post in like 10 to 12,000 and say, well, this is not correct here, this sentence here, therefore the whole website is useless. And one of the other things that was being done in CNN, I'm not sure if you've seen the interview with, they brought one of the advisors of Bush and had a panel where they were basically trying to attack and perpetuate the same lies, and it was atrocious. And people, the good thing about it is that people were basically framing this clip and sending it